Hey, good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing today? Welcome to my Sunday live stream where we're going to talk about photography and what's new, what's been happening, and uh, just the normal catch up, see how you guys are doing. It's always good to see everyone. I see Darko's here and Lund is here. Ulf Lund, I'm sorry. Andreas, good to see you. And Seraphin, oh my goodness, it's been a while, Seraphin. How are you? And Marsha, always good to see you from Florida. Um, Yeah, Florida is gosh, I gotta make it down there this year. It's so beautiful down there and there's so many photographic opportunities. And I love hot weather, so I know this is probably one of the worst times to go, but I like it. And I'll let you know. I'll let you know if I go down there. I have to plan a road trip. Um, so I've been busy, mostly just birding, doing birds in flight photography, and I rearranged my backyard set up to my front yard because Ellie is just a little bit too aggressive and was interfering with my bird photography. So I moved it out to the front yard, but that kind of has its ups and downs too. Um, One of the good things is the lighting's a little bit better in the front yard. Uh, the bad thing is that I have a major road right in front of my house, and I don't know how people will feel with me with a big giant bazooka pointing at them as they're driving by. Because this neighborhood, people just stop and give you a hard time about taking their picture. Uh, which is, obviously I'm not photographing them, but in the back of my head, it kind of bothers me a little bit. But other than that, I've been getting some really cool shots in my front yard. And summertime, like I said, I love the hot weather and everything, but wow, it brings a whole nother level of problems though. With the mosquitoes and ticks, and those two really. I got bit. I mean, it's morning; they shouldn't be out, but yeah, I got bit all over the place this morning doing a little bit of shooting. So I'm gonna go get some citronella candles and put them out. Hopefully that'll help. Uh, oh, Seraphin's going to a knife maker show. Cool. Yeah, knives are interesting. I mean, they're just it's almost like an art form, the way they make knives and everything. I've never really gotten into knives, but when you happen to go by a store, like a knife store or kiosk or whatever, it's always interesting to see all the intricacies and fine details. It would make for very interesting product photography, I think, uh, or very challenging because you have lots of detail you have to capture, but at the same time, there's a lot of reflections that you have to kind of watch out for as well. I guess it wouldn't be too dissimilar from jewelry, shooting jewelry, but product photography is an area that I don't know, I would struggle a little bit with it, I think, because of the particularly very shiny objects, right? Because you have to be able to photograph it without getting a reflection of your camera and flashes and everything in the product itself, and that can be difficult, I think. Wow, 70,000 people. Wow, that's a lot. Yeah, Marcia, the front yard tells everyone that you have expensive gear in the house. Yeah, that's the other thing too is oh, yeah, just showing that I'm sitting there with the camera, you know. Because like I said, there's probably hundreds of people that drive by within 30 minutes. And I know half of them are scoping out everyone's houses. And I live on a major road, so it kind of lends itself to people being able to pull in and dart out and get away pretty quickly because it takes them right to the highway. Anyhow, you got to live your life and just enjoy the things that you have. You can't just live in fear all the time. And I try to get out, but it's there was a fight. About 50 people at the shopping center. 50 people out there fighting, this week. I just can't believe it. And one person was killed, but it's just unreal the kind of the well, things are different now. I don't know what's changed, but it's gotten pretty hairy around here. I mean, more than usual. I mean, I'm used to like a little gunfire every now and then, but these brawls that just break out of nowhere. I haven't seen that before. That's a new one. Uh, but uh, generally generally speaking, the parks are nice, and I've never had any issues going to the public parks and places. But just in the more rural areas, like where I live, it's a little scary sometimes. Hey Jeff, how are you? David Black, good to see you. Um, yes, Jeff is recuperating. I hope everything's going well. Uh, Keep me posted on that. I appreciate it. And I think Darko had a question here. He brings up a good point because there was what couple of things came out this week, right? The Canon R7 and R10. There was also an announcement that OM Systems is releasing an OM5, whatever that might be. And I was on Jay Christina. I don't know if you guys ever watch his channel or if I'm sure you've seen it. He's the guy that drinks tea a lot in his streams or his videos. And I was online and I happened to see he was doing a live streaming and inviting people to come on. So I came on and I was on there for almost an hour, I think, believe it or not. And that was pretty cool. I mean, Jay Christina, he has a lot of experience, right? He's a professional photographer and uh, also has been in the industry for about 20 years or more, at least, and used to do a lot of the shows, right? And covering the shows, I think, as a uh, I mean, reporter is the wrong word, but he used to cover the shows in the industry. He used to cover the industry at the shows. He still covers the industry, just doing it on YouTube now. And he gives a lot of good insight, and I think it's always interesting to hear other people's perspective. For example, like when the EM1X came out, he gave the pricing a hard time. He didn't really say much about the camera. He understands that there is a place for every format, but he certainly gave the pricing that Olympus gave the EM1X when it came out a hard time. Like a lot of people did. I mean, he was in good company, to be fair. Um, but it was very gracious of him to have me on the show. And his other buddy, I think Stu was his name. I forget, or Steve. There was another guest on the show that might be getting some Olympus gear because he's a macro photographer, and he said a lot of people really like Micro Four Thirds for macro photography. So that was interesting, and those both of those guys are Canon guys though, and they love Canon. So it was actually a stream about the Canon R7 and R10. And a couple of things I'm starting to see come up in cameras now are a lot of the things that uh, Olympus has been putting in their cameras for years now, right? Since the M1 Mark II, at least. Um, and like I'm starting to see Pro Capture pop up here and there. I believe they're in the Canons now, and the Nikon Z9 firmware update now has a version of Pro Capture, and it's something as Olympus users we've been enjoying for years and years. It's really a fantastic feature. Also, now I see that the Canons are the R7 and R10 at least have subject detect built in. And I can't remember if it was specific to a subject like birds, animals, trains, but it has a subject detect autofocus inherited from their higher end camera, the R3. So people expect the autofocus to perform really well and do very good subject tracking. And it doesn't have the same speed in terms of shutter, right? Because we can, on the OM1 or EM1 Mark III, we can do 60 frames per second and 30 frames. I think it's 30 frames per second with autofocus, and or it might be 25. But it's still about double what the Canon does, whatever those numbers are. And so I think as a sports action camera, the Olympus and OM systems, particularly the OM1, is going to be the superior camera with respect to frames per second. And I know I've certainly been taking advantage of that this past couple of weeks, trying to get the exact correct frame that I want, because the autofocus is tremendous on the OM1. I mean, it just, yeah, it's not perfect, right? But when I'm tracking birds, man, there's times when that bird takes off and it's following it the whole way, and I just have to pick which frame I want to keep. Now, these little tiny birds, they're so fast, though. My goodness. They get out of frame very quickly and out of focus very quickly too. So the best way to capture birds in flight, if you're doing little birds in the front yard like me or backyard, you need a little bit of distance so you can track them. Because this is really hard, because I'm taking a picture and they're just out of the frame like this, and it's hard for me to track them. I'm still trying to get a good picture of a nuthatch, because I have this nuthatch that, and they're really cool looking birds, I think. I can get them on a stick, or on a branch, but I want to get him in flight. And he's really small. He's only about this big, and he's very fast. So that's my goal, is try to get a decent picture of a nuthatch. But yeah, so the Canon, like I said, the Canon's R7 and R10, it's like $1,500 and $1,000 respectively. The R10 being the smaller, lower, entry level model that supposedly people are saying that it's going to replace the Canon M series, which would be a shame. I think the M series is really an awesome little system, right? It's very small, compact, not too dissimilar from our EM5 Mark III, and but they just never flushed out the lens system for it. And there's certainly a range of lenses that'll get most people buy, but there's no hardcore lenses for it. Very high end, super sharp professional glass, like pro glass that we have for our Olympus cameras. And I don't know why. I think they could have flushed that out, and it has a much lower entry point. You can get an M5, M50 with a lens for like $600 or $700, depending on the sale. And it's a very competent camera. So I don't know why, the R7 is $1,000 entry point with no lens. And it has it's not even a BSI sensor, right? Or stacked. And not that that's a deal breaker, but the price point, 1,000, 1,500, that's getting up there, right? And but the theory is that they have an APS-C sensor uh, with an RF lens mount, so they only have to focus developing lenses really for the RF mount instead of two mount systems, the M and the RF. But I don't know what the big deal is. They maybe it'll help them reduce costs on the manufacturing side. Because I don't know enough about lens manufacturing, but if they can reduce costs on the manufacturing side, maybe they'll come out with some cheap lenses. And because the Nikon F mount went on forever, you're right, but they had to make DX lenses and FX lenses, but it was the same mount, and you could interchange these lenses, albeit one would have to full frame camera would have to be cropped if you use a DX lens. um, but that did that did create some confusion, I think, to the consumer, because they didn't know if they need to buy a DX lens or FX lens. And you know half the time these big box stores, you don't the sales staff may not have any idea the difference between the two. um, so people are just buying the wrong lens for their camera a lot of times. And not that you can't use the FX lenses, all the full frame lenses on any camera, regardless of format. It's always best to buy a lens that's been optimized for the sensor that it was designed for. Uh, because you save size and space and weight, but there's also some optics design issues, right, that might come out with smaller lenses versus larger lenses. And optimizing a lens for the sensor is going to give you the best results, generally speaking. Okay, but that's kind of what I've been up to, looking at, always looking at new cameras. Uh, and I don't particularly have any interest in the R7 or R10. I don't know what it would add to my photography if I got one of those. But Darko, I think, was asking if there's going to be a way to compare the subject detect with those cameras or other camera systems with the OM1. And we'll just have to leave that to the bigger channels that can get access to gear a little bit more readily than I can. And I'm not the best, beta tester ever, because I just don't have the skill set to really competently say one camera's better than the other when it comes to autofocus. Uh, sure, I can go out there and track things, but I have to test. It takes me a long time to get a feel for a camera. I've had my OM1 now for what, March, April, May, almost 3 months, right? And I'm still getting a feel for the autofocus and the tracking, uh, because I have to be able to separate what's user error, right, or lack of skill set versus issues with the camera. And it's hard for me to distinguish between those two. It's a very fine line. And there's some things I do recognize. Definitely there's issues with autofocus on the camera versus, I made the mistake when I go in and review the pictures. And but yeah, there's so many different lenses and combinations with the cameras and bodies that, if I happen to get a camera and I'll get a kit lens first always, right? And I get out there and the performance is kind of, that's not fair to the camera, right? If you put a pro lens onto the camera and then go out, you're going to get better results, no question. So I think it's a lot of the reviews you see online, it's very hard to take all of these variables into account. And you just have to take it with a grain of salt. If it's best, really, I think, is, you get, if you, it's really best to test the camera out for yourself. If your level of skill set is pretty high already, is to test your camera. If you can rent it first or borrow it from a friend that might have it. Because for me, for example, I know my skill set is, I'm the same photographer I am, whether I'm using a kit lens or a pro lens, right? My skill set's the same. And I borrowed the 300 millimeter f4 from friend of a friend kind of thing through the photo club. And immediately I saw a big leap in my keeper rate, right? And the quality of the images that I captured. So, whoops. Ellie's down there. I didn't see her. She's really quiet. But immediately I saw a big difference. And it wouldn't matter, no matter how many reviews I see online for 300 f4, there's no way for me to appreciate the difference, right? Of a pro lens versus a, say, kit lens or standard lens. And that's what I mean. Even if I got the gear, if I had access to a lot of different kinds of gear and lens combinations, doing those kind of reviews and comparisons would make sense. Which reminds me, one of the best reviewers online, someone that I trust really about, I would say 99%, is Matthew Gasqui. I'll have to ask him how to pronounce his name so I don't say it wrong every time. But he has a channel, I think it's called Mirrorless Lessons or Mirrorless Comparisons. But I put a link to one of his videos recently that he did a review on birds and flight settings for the OM1. And it was really excellent. Lots of great tips in there for everyone, including myself. And I learned a few things, that I never thought about before, but when he said it, it made complete sense. And you'll have to watch it. You'll have to watch it. So there's a link to it in my community post, but just go to his channel and you'll see it's his most recent video. And I'll have to see if I can get him on as a guest on one of the live streams, because I really respect the hard work that he does for reviewing cameras, particularly mirrorless cameras. And he's done a ton of Olympus reviews and lenses. And I would say he could tell you with a much higher degree of credibility what camera systems perform better versus, another camera system. And generally speaking, if I recall, the Olympus cameras in the past, including the OM1, have always done very well. And considering he's comparing them against cameras that cost 2-3 times as much, that we're within some standard deviation of capturing images in focus, birds in flight in particular, says a lot. Says a lot about the Olympus cameras and their capability. So yeah, it's rarely it's number one. Olympus is not number one in autofocus, rare. But when you actually go out and use it and have the skill set to use it, the keeper rate is really close to very, very high-end systems from other camera manufacturers. And that's one of the things. Like I said, I've got maybe $5,000 with a 300 f4 and an OM1, and I'm right up there with $20,000 cameras in terms of, autofocus acquisition and tracking and all of that when it comes to birds and the kind of photography I do. Uh, within a few percentage points. So that difference is not enough. My skill set has a bigger margin of error than the difference between a high end camera and the OM1. So I'm pretty impressed with it overall. It certainly made a big difference in my bird photography, and I'm really loving it now. Having a 300 f4 Pro helps a lot too, though. I mean, I know I've done streams in the past where I compared the two, and those are kind of one-off images, right? Just the picture here, a picture there, and no question, the 75 to 300 standard lens is a great lens for the money. 400, $500, and you can get really good results with it. But there's no comparison to a 300 millimeter f4 Pro when you uh, actually have to compare or use the lenses over time, right? And you will see a big difference in performance. I mean, there's a reason it costs, a lot more. It's not just it's not just the glass, but the design, the build quality, and the manufacturing process. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into designing and building a lens that it's very hard to appreciate until you uh, start to use the lens and capture the images, and then you'll start to see the differences. And it, I'm planning to do a video or a live stream about lenses, lens design, and things that would try to explain why are the pro lenses so much more expensive. What are they doing differently to make these lenses uh, superior, right? And it really has to do with the manufacturing process is a big part of it. The quality of glass that they use and the kinds of glass that they use in a lens and the coatings, um, and the polishing of the lenses, because a lot of the lenses these days are all computer designed. They're all computer designed, and they're all pretty much robotic automation in terms of assembly. When it comes to building the lenses, the kit lenses in particular. So there's a lot of manufacturing tolerances that are much tighter now than they used to be when lenses were all handmade. So when they crank out, 1,000 kit lenses, there's going to be some sample variation because the tolerances during the manufacturing process are not as tight as they would be, say, on a pro lens. And it's because of the kind of materials they use. They're using plastics, a lot of plastics in kit lenses versus, metals in the pro lenses. And, when you use metal, you can have much, much tighter tolerances. So there's not as much sample variation when you buy pro lenses versus, kit lenses and standard lenses, right? And then again, the polishing and the kinds of glass that they use. So I'm working on. I'm doing my due diligence right now to research this. Unfortunately, I don't have access to the lens manufacturing facility. I'd love to go visit a plant and just see how they make things. So I have to just do my own research as much as I can, and then I'll try and present a video either live or I'll make a video. I'll probably just do it live so I can take questions and things. Um, but it's a big deal. It's a big deal going from a standard kit lens to pro lenses. The differences that they have to make to get those lenses, as good as they are, and why they cost so much. And it also leads me to sensor design, and because the sensors themselves, right, have micro lenses on them. And those micro lenses have to work together in conjunction with the lenses they design for the camera. It makes a big difference too, believe it or not. So that's why a lot of times when you adapt vintage type glass to our digital cameras, you get a lot of interesting characteristics that you would not get if you were using that lens on a film camera, because of the way digital sensors are. They're more polarized. It's hard to explain. When I do my video, I'll try and explain it a little better. But film doesn't have any polarization, right? Film is just a flat piece of organic chemicals that, when exposed to light, react. Versus the digital sensor, there's individual pixels and wires and micro lenses and things that, if you don't design the lens specifically for a digital sensor, there are some differences. And for the most part, designing a lens, you just want the focal point to land on the focal plane perfectly, whether it's film or if it's digital. Okay. So in that sense, the design is not much different. But when they design lenses for digital sensors, they don't have to correct for some things as much as they would have in a film lens, because a lot of the times the in-camera processing can correct minor errors in the lens, or defects in the lens focal point, like coma, chromatic aberration, and the other. I'm kind of going a little beyond how much I've researched so far, but there's a difference there where the lenses, the camera will correct for some of the defects in the lens design so that you get a cleaner image. Whereas when you adapt a vintage lens, none of those things are corrected in camera by the camera itself. So that's why a lot of times vintage lenses, when you adapt them, they have more character, so to speak. And character is basically, these are defects in the lens design, and or the lens was not designed for digital sensors. So there's other problems that come into play, and they had to redesign the lenses and the lenses themselves and the micro lenses on the sensor to correct for the way the light travels and hits the focal plane. And then that's why it's really fascinating. And then there's the MTF charts, which are kind of a wow, that's a nightmare in itself. But it was really interesting to see, when I was going through forums and things, to see people refer to MTF charts and talk about them like, oh, this lens looks really good on the MTF chart. It's very promising. And I'm like, when I looked at the MTF chart, I'm like, well, this chart's a little bit deceiving, because they scaled it differently than they scaled this other MTF chart, which I'll show you when I make this video. But I was like, that's a little deceiving, because you should have a linear scale on the x-axis and the y-axis, but the x-axis was not linear. It was almost logarithmic, right? So it looked much flatter, and the flatter the curve is, the more perfect the lens is. It looked much flatter than it really was, because of the way they scaled the x-axis. And I was like, man. And people, the average consumer who's trying to make a decision, and a lens buying decision, might refer to an MTF chart, right? If it's available. They're not available too often. And you have to be really careful. You have to really look at it and understand the differences between MTF charts. Never mind if they're scaling them differently. That's It was Panasonic who did it actually. I think on one of their L mount lenses. That that was uncool, in my opinion. Um, and also, the lenses. A lot of the MTF charts, they don't. I think Olympus does it right though. They show they. I think their MTF charts go to 50 line pairs, which is that's where you need to be when you're actually comparing lenses. A lot of the lens charts, they do 10, 20, sometimes 30 line pairs. Rarely do you see, and line pairs meaning how many lines per millimeter, so you can kind of determine the resolution both in a two directions, right? uh, but you know you have to be able to compare the lenses on the same scale in terms of line pairs, and then uh, what sensor is it going on? What sensor are they using the comparing the lens on? And it's all done actually in the software. Rarely do they actually test the lens after the fact and give you an MTF chart. The MTF charts are all generated by the lens design software to give you the potential sharpness of a lens. And only a few manufacturers, and they only do it on their high-end lenses, do they test their lenses in a real setting on on a camera with a chart and et cetera, et cetera. There's always third-party reviewers that can do that. They use some other software and they actually test it, but you have to know the camera that they're using it on, the sensor, and specifically because our Micro Four Thirds sensors have such such tiny pixels, right? It's like 3.2 or 3.3 microns or something. I mean, it's really small. And you need at least 60 line pair MTF chart to really see if that lens is resolving down to the pixel level. And at least 60 line pair MTF chart. And I don't see those anywhere. The most I see is 30, 40, 50 is the highest I've seen. I have not seen a 60, 70, 80 line pair MTF chart that would work or give you some idea if is this lens able to out resolve the sensor. Because your sensor, the sensor, we have these high megapixel sensors now. Even our 20 megapixel sensor, because it's so small on a Micro Four Thirds chip, the pixel density is very small, equivalent to like an 80 megapixel or whatever full frame. And you can't just look at an MTF chart and say this lens is going to work on an 80 megapixel sensor or a 20 megapixel Micro Four Thirds. They may not have designed it for that kind of resolution. And so you put a lens, even if it was a high quality lens at the time, you put a lens onto a very high resolution camera and it's going to look a little bit soft, right? It's not going to be able to resolve or look as sharp as if you put it on a lower megapixel sensor, because the theory being, is the lens able to project enough resolution onto the sensor for it to be compatible in line. And I can tell you that there's a couple lenses that I think stand out in the Micro Four Thirds system, and putting the pro lenses aside, they're all very good. The 75 millimeter f1.8 and the 25 millimeter f1.8, those are probably two of the sharpest lenses in the Micro Four Thirds system, without going pro, right? The pro lenses, of course, are going to outperform. Those two lenses are really good. And then put kit lenses aside, all of the primes are really good in the Olympus Micro Four Thirds system. I don't know about Panasonic. I haven't looked into those yet, but I'm sure those are very good too because a lot of those have the Leica branding, which have to meet a certain quality standard to get the Leica name on it. But uh, on the Olympus side, the 25-75 are really, really good. And and believe it or not, I don't know why this is turning into a lens stream. I didn't mean it to. Maybe I should stop. Let me check the comments, see if anybody even cares that I'm talking about it. Let's see. Oh, Rick is here. Hey, Rick. David Tellett, good morning. Um, yeah, Rick has some suggestions for photographing products. Let me just put that up while I'm reading the rest here. Um, oh, Marcia, you're still waiting for your OM1. Yeah, it's awesome. There was a firmware update this week too on the OM1. So I did that yesterday finally, and haven't had it freeze up on me since because I was one of the people that, yeah, it froze up on me time to time. I mean, well, not time to time. It froze up on me 3 or 4 times out of the hundreds of thousands of pictures I've taken by now. And it's so it didn't happen often, but it was annoying when it did, right? And Lassay's here. Good to see you. And oh yeah, the 9mm f1 point something, right? f1.7. That's an interesting lens. It's $500. It's 9mm rectilinear lens from Panasonic, and that looks pretty awesome. I mean, I already have the Olympus fisheye lens, 8mm fisheye, and it's a f1.8. So I'm pretty content with what I have because I can make it rectilinear, in software. But uh, I almost prefer having the fisheye over a rectilinear if I was going to pick one because you can always make the fisheye rectilinear. Well, that said, you can make a rectilinear lens fisheye too in software. So what difference? um, but being able to see it in fisheye form natively and then correcting it in post is fine. I guess you should get both. I don't know. If you have a problem and you have the money, just buy both and you'll be all right. Uh, but yeah, that's an interesting lens, and I'm sure it's very good. And yeah, Matthew Gasquet or Matthew Gasqui. I don't know if it's Gasquet, I guess. I always get confused when there's foreign names. This is foreign to me, right? Uh, I guess my name would be foreign to him, right? But there's always silent letters and accents and things that are just it's very hard to know just by looking at the spelling. Oh, Marco's here. Good to see you. Wow, you had to get a third copy. The um, the Olympus 100 to 400. It's not a pro lens, but I guess it's weather sealed. Has image stabilization, and by all accounts, is a very good lens. But not being a pro lens, it's probably going on running on a different manufacturing process. In fact, that lens was, I believe, designed by Sigma. Because Sigma has the exact same lens for APS-C, 100 to 400. And I looked at the lens design, where they show you the cutaway. It's identical, same elements in the same positions, and spacing and everything. Now, if there are any differences in the design, it's not apparent internally, okay? And the I would bet, I would say 99%, I'm sure that was designed by Sigma. So it's possible it might be on Sigma's manufacturing plant, uh, being built there and sold by OM Systems. I don't know for a fact, but looking at the lens design, they're identical. And the Sigma one came out a while ago, a year or two ago, and it was designed specifically for mirrorless systems, APS-C mirrorless systems, the Sigma 100 to 400. And it's quite a bit cheaper. It's like $900 instead of $1,500 when you have to buy it under the Olympus name. And everybody said that the Sigma version was excellent. So but I think there is going to be more sample variation because it probably wasn't designed by Olympus, but also it's probably going on a whole different, probably being manufactured at a different site altogether. But that's just a guess. It's anyone's guess, really. And Bob says, hello from Drizzly, UK. Your recent Flickr photos with the 300 f4 noticeably sharper. I don't think I can afford one after splashing out an OM1, which is finally, well, congratulations on the OM1. Just go with the 75 to 300, man. I got great results with that lens in the OM1. Yeah, it's not going to be as sharp, clearly, but you'll definitely be very happy and have a lot of fun. That's the most important thing with the 75 to 300. You just have to be in good light, and you'll be okay. And don't zoom it all the way to 300 if you can help it. Just stay at around 240. Usually, zoom lenses in particular, perform best within the limits, right? So don't shoot at 75, don't shoot at 300. Kind of shoot somewhere in between, like 10% on either end, and you should get a little better performance. Also, when it's stopped down to f8, I found it to be just a tad bit sharper. But the sacrifice is you're going to be using a higher ISO. So if you're in very good light and your ISOs are low, shoot at f8. But if your light starts to drop a little bit and you notice your ISO is going over 1600, just shoot wide open at f6.7 on the 75 to 300, and you'll get better results because the difference in sharpness between f6.7 and f8 is less than the difference in ISO noise between 1600 and 3200, for example, right? So that jump in ISO noise between 1600 and 3200 is more than the difference in sharpness between 6.7 and f8. So if you're in good light, that's what I recommend. But okay, that's that. And said Surfing says I wasn't interested in the OM1, but I'm super interested in the OM5 for a compact size like my EM5 Mark III. I hardly ever want to take my G9 on a paid shoot. Really, G9 is an awesome camera. But yeah, for me, I can tell you that I still need to trade in or sell my EM1 Mark III or my EM5 Mark III, right? And between the two, I'd rather sell the EM1 Mark III because I have the OM1, right? If I didn't have the OM1, I'd keep the EM1 Mark III, no question. But because I have the OM1, I don't need the EM1 Mark III anymore. The OM1 replaces that 100%. The OM1 does not replace the EM5 Mark III because it's, the EM5 Mark III is a different camera. It's smaller and lighter, right? And serves a whole different, just it's a whole different kind of camera. Yet just as capable as the M1 Mark III in most ways that matter. So, yeah, I lose the handheld high-res shot. I lose live ND. You lose some of the bells and whistles, right? The custom mode dial. I think I'm going to miss that the most on the M1 Mark III. But the benefit of getting a smaller, lighter camera outweighs those bells and whistles, because I already have an OM1 that does it anyway if I need it. But I'm with you. I'm with you on carrying small and light. And Marco, this is interesting. This is a message to Marco from Rick. Marco, I didn't know if you had any kind of lens design experience. I know you're a computer guy. But yeah, if you have some lens design stuff, that would be interesting to have you on. And Andreas says, oh, I think I talked about this. What do I think about this? It looks good. I mean, I haven't shot with it myself, but I did look at a couple of the reviews online, in particular the one by Micro 4 Nerds, Emily, where she pixel peeped into some corners and things, and it looks fabulous. I don't think really, if you need f1.7 though, that's the thing. Do you really need that fast an aperture? If you do, then yeah, definitely get that lens. If you don't need that wide of an aperture, there are other choices, right? At $500, what could you get? Maybe the 9-18 from Olympus. That's an f4 to f5.6, but then you have a zoom and some capability, and it's very sharp as well. I mean, I would kind of weigh in versatility versus speed of f1.7 at that price point. But I think in a bubble, yeah, the 9mm f1.7 looks pretty awesome. And Plato's here. Hey, Plato. And Larry Orr says, I'm considering purchasing the Zuiko 14-42 Easy Pancake lens for my EM5 Mark III to make it more pocketable. What do you think of it? I think optically, if you're going to compare kit lenses, the Pancake versus the regular zoom, optically they're virtually identical. I feel like the Pancake one is actually a hair sharper, but let's not go there. Let's say they're identical, right? The only problem with the Pancake zoom, power zoom lens, the Easy, is some people have run into problems with it stopping to work, right? And has to be sent in for repair, which almost isn't worth it anymore. And the problem is that there's wire connectors inside that move as you zoom in and out, right? And every time you turn the camera on or turn the camera off, the lens expands or retracts, and there's a ribbon cable inside that works itself loose, and then the lens becomes inoperable. I would say it's very rare, but not so rare that I would hesitate to get that over the standard regular zoom, right? Non-power zoom. A very good compact lens is the Panasonic 12-32. That is not power zoom and is sharper than either of the Olympus 14-42s. So If you want to get a compact pancake style lens, I would recommend the Panasonic 12 to 32 over the Olympus Pancake 14 to 42 Easy. That 10 millimeters that you lose on the end in terms of telephoto side, that is pretty substantial. So that would be the only, excuse me, I had to sneeze there. That would be the only thing that would hold me back, and I would tell you, just forget about pancake and get the 14 to 42 regular zoom lens. But my recommendation at this point is the 12 to 32 or the regular kit lens from Olympus over the power zoom pancake lens, because it's happened to me, and I've gotten emails over the years from other viewers that this has happened to. So is it a problem in a big way? Probably not. You may get one, and probably thousands of people have gotten one, no problems at all. But it's happened often enough that I would hesitate to recommend that lens over the Panasonic. And yes, Micro Four Nerds did a great review. She did. Emily is awesome. Wow, that's an interesting way to look at it. I don't know what a distance selling law is, but yeah, consumer grade lens from 3 different suppliers, test all 3 and return 2. Yeah. Of course, I think most people buying a consumer grade lens aren't going to be that critical, right? But if you're an enthusiast and you do want the best lens for the money, that's not a bad idea. Yes, I've only used it for birding. It's just so telephoto, you can't zoom it. It's hard to use it for anything else. I'm sure there's other applications. There's sporting events, race cars, things like that. But I don't have access to those kinds of things because I don't have any kids, and all my nephews have outgrown, high school. So I don't really have access to even high school sports, right? Because they're very strict about anyone getting onto school property. And then yeah, race car events and things, I'd have to travel quite a bit. I'm trying to think. uh I mean, if I do get a chance to do a sporting event, I will definitely take that lens with me. But right now, I just don't have an opportunity to do any kind of sporting events that I can think of. And it would just be kind of creepy for me to go up to the park where people are just playing, like a lot of times offices, right? Different companies and different offices have baseball teams and things. Um, I'd have to be pretty proactive at getting to know some people and offering to photograph their events. I mean, I've thought about doing that in the past, but it's not. Yeah, unfortunately, that I don't have a lot of access or contacts to do anything but birding. But I'd like to. I did do a golf event, but I didn't really need the 300 millimeter f4 for that because golfing, I was able to get pretty close. Right, I could walk right up to the players. And I see who says, but what makes this lens completely different from full frame 600 f4 is that you can take close-up photos in combination with focus stacking, and then you can use the high. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of advantages of pairing our lenses with our cameras, right? Yeah, I thought so, Marco. I thought you were a PC guy, not a lens guy. I think I'd have to have Matthew Gasquet on. Oh, and a message back to Marco is Rick is saying he's thinking about how much of today's lens design revolves around software tuning and what we need to consider when cross-firing Olympus versus Panasonic lenses. I think when the Panasonics and Olympus camera bodies are using the same sensor, well, even if they're not using the same sensor, they're using the micro four thirds format, and that is an open source format. So the specs for designing lenses for the micro four thirds system is apparently publicly available to any company that wants to design lenses for the micro four thirds system. So I can't imagine there being too much difference when a lens is designed specifically for the micro four thirds, like Panasonic and Olympus do, between our cameras. Though I have heard there are some differences. I haven't seen them myself, but people have told me, like on my 7 to 14 millimeter f4 Panasonic lens, they told me that it doesn't do purple flaring on the Panasonic bodies, but it did. I you know I sold my Panasonic GX85 recently to buy the 300 f4 Pro, but when I put that 7 to 14 on my GX85, I still got purple flaring, uh, either on my Olympus or my Panasonic, and that was the only time someone said that there was a difference between using Panasonic lenses on something that I could test for anyway. Uh, the difference between Panasonic and Olympus lenses, and swapping interchanging those brands. And in that particular case didn't make any difference. So, like I said, that kind of leads me back to the Micro Four Thirds standard for designing lenses for that system is publicly available to other manufacturers to design lenses. And that's why there should be, and there is, a lot of third-party manufacturers designing lenses specifically for Micro Four Thirds. That said, a lot of the lenses were designed for APS-C, and then they're just putting Micro Four Third mounts on them. In which case, those lenses could be problematic, right? John Truman, oh my goodness, it's been a while. How are you? John Truman is here. I feel like it's been forever since I've done like a normal photo chat live stream. Well, this is yeah. Here's a message from Dave. For people in film photography, their repair shops are telling him that parts are becoming scarce or not available for the old cameras. The only cure for that is buy two. One for parts, right? So you can buy one for parts and buy one that works, and that might be the way to go. But and then some cameras like the Pentax K1000 will be around forever. But if you're talking about more vintage cameras like a TLR or something, yeah, I can see that being a problem even now. Don't you have a major military airfield near you? Likely there's an aviation enthusiast website will have info on photography access titles for capturing planes in flight. That's interesting. Yeah, I do have an Air Force base like 2 miles from me. I mean, it feels like they're next door because the helicopters fly so low. They fly so low, okay, the helicopters, that my 300 F4, I can't fit the whole helicopter in the frame if they fly over my house. That's how low they fly. Um, but I know access to the base is impossible in terms of, you know, the uh, as a regular civilian, I don't have access to the base. Now, my mom has access to the base because my dad is retired military, or he was. He's passed away now. But so I can get on the base with her together. But then I don't know what the rules are when you're on the base, what kind of photography they would allow. I would have to do some research into that. Um, but for the most part, that Air Force base, mostly all I see are helicopters. Also the other problem is the Air Force Base, Andrews Air Force Base, is also where the President of the United States flies in and out of. That's the place that he flies out from when he goes from DC to Andrews Air Force Base to take Air Force One. So I would imagine the security level is even higher for people doing photography or doing anything on the base because of that. So there is a air show in September this year that they do open to the public, and the beauty of it is, for about 2 or 3 weeks before the air show, it's a blessing and a curse. They fly right over my house for about 2 or 3 weeks straight, and it is so freaking loud. These jets literally just flying right over my house. Like I said, I don't think even a 300 F4 might be too tight because they get that close. Because I think I had a 75 millimeter lens and a jet flew over my house, um, and it fit about half the frame. So 300, I think even then. But anyway, yeah, time to time, and it's been a few years since they've had an air show because of all the lockdowns, but they're going to do an air show in September, and man, I'm going to have lots of opportunities then to photograph them practicing. Anyway, I don't even have to go to the air show because it's just right over my house. But it's interesting. I don't know if there's any. I have to look into that. That's an interesting idea. Do you think anyone will ever make a new 120 film camera to replace the dying original cameras? Oh, I'm trying to think. My guess would be I mean, I know Holga still makes them, but no, who wants a Holga 120 camera, right? I mean, if other than for fun, but who would want one to take serious pictures? Um, I don't know. Nico Photography News. He'd be a good person to ask. I'm sure you know who he is. He does photography news for film. But the good thing is, honestly, going back to this question, I mean, they're getting expensive, but there are, the Hasselblads, they stay pretty much fully mechanical. I think up to the 503. They're they're fully mechanical, so there's still people that can repair those. But if you're talking about a 10 or 20-year timeline, yeah, that's a tough call. I don't know if anybody will make one like the Hasselblads were, right? Yeah, that 7 to 14, man. It's you have to work around the flare. It's tough to do. I mean, I want to replace it with the Olympus 8 to 25 because that's not going to have the flaring issues that the Panasonic does, but oh, it's just still a big price gap. I'm still going to have to save up and also wait for it to go on sale or find it used at a good price, but that's just not the case yet. And the software installed in Olympus camera will contain software lens corrections where Olympus applied to fix issues in the software that were in the glass. Panasonic wouldn't have that knowledge. Yeah. And vice versa, right? So I think the only thing that gets fixed uh, are distortion type corrections, right? I think that lens data might get transmitted into the camera because when I take pictures in JPEG, because raw images they're not going to have any corrections anyway. They're just going to be pretty much raw. I mean, there's still corrections done, but the distortion side, lens distortion side, the raw images are not corrected. Uh, but the JPEGs are, and when I take JPEG images with my Panasonic lens, the distortions seem to be corrected. So, but I'll have to do a side by side test because I still have two Panasonic lenses. One, it's going to be hard to tell if there's any distortion because it's 25 millimeter f1.7. But the 7 to 14, that definitely has some significant barrel distortion that seems to be corrected in JPEGs, even on my Olympus cameras. So I have to look into that. But obviously, other things like chromatic aberration, chroma, um, those kind of things would not be corrected in an Olympus camera, uh, if they're done at all on either camera. In theory, um, they are supposed to correct for these things in camera through the software in the camera, if they designed it that way, right? And the lens would have to communicate that information to the camera, so that information would be stored in the lens, and that would have to be communicated to the camera. That's that would be interesting to see. I'd have to really test for that. I mean, short of talking to a lens designer at Olympus or Panasonic or OM Systems, I mean, it's really just a guessing game for me, right? I don't know anyone. And it's, Panasonic and Olympus, they don't really publicize any of their manufacturing process. It's virtually impossible for me to find any information on how they manufacture their lenses. I mean, that's true for most manufacturers, but those two, I can't even get an overview or an outline or bullet point, nothing. It's like total radio silence there. And then Dave says, when you get on the Air Force Base, get a hold of the base information officer. He should be able to get the rules of getting photos of planes. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll have to look into it. Um, I know definitely there's a park near National Airport, which is a civilian commercial jet. You know, I have access to that pretty readily from the park. They fly right over your head, and they have an angle where I can take a picture of them taking off. So the only thing is, it's so loud. Oh my God, just I'm very sensitive to noise. I don't like noisy, crowded places. Um, if you guys see my vlogs when I go into Alexandria, I cannot get a good audio there because it's so loud all the time. And going to the airport, maybe I'll do that though. I'll do a vlog at that particular park with my 300 f4 just for fun and see what kind of shots I can get. Because that'll be good practice before I go take pictures of jets and things. And System Mature is here. Good to see you. Friends, don't let friends use whole guns. You're killing me. Ugh. I don't know why I found that so funny, but that's hilarious. Oh, so Caitlin has some inside information. You must be retired or not retired. I'm sorry. You might be active or know people in the military. Uh, yeah, Kickstarter is where it all happens. Those things are scary, right? Because you always hear about those projects that received all this money, then nothing happened. But a lot of good projects have come out of it, from what I can remember. I can't remember now, but did you sell your EM1? I have a good friend who's looking for one in good condition. I sold my EM1 Mark II. I still have my EM1 Mark III. So if somebody wants to buy that, let me know. I'll just see what they're going for and then double the price because it was mine, right? Just kidding. If I was like somebody like Ansel Adams or something, I could see people charging a premium uh, for the gear, but maybe after I die, uh, no, it won't make any difference. Whatever they're going for on eBay, I know I can get $800 for it on trade, so I would imagine it's going for 900 on eBay or 1,000, whatever, something like that. But it has to be in the U.S. because shipping overseas, it just doesn't make any sense. Oh, let's see. Rick says Andrews Air Force Base does have a visitor control center. No idea if you can request a photography pass, but if you don't ask, you don't know. Okay, I'll look into it. Rob is a sensitive soul. Yeah, I am very sensitive. And not had too many problems with my Pano 8 to 18 with internal zoom. Gotta watch the fisheye curve on 8mm when shooting in restricted areas like buildings. Yeah, that's why I want to get the 8 to 18 is not a cheap lens. I could almost buy, if not buy, the 8 to 25 from Olympus for the same money, I believe. And then you can get the Olympus 9 to 18 for $500, $300 used. But I haven't checked in a while. Oh, you're in the United States Marine Corps. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you for your service. Wow. Oh, that's cool. When you're in the Air Force, you got pictures of B-52s coming in for landing above 100 feet of. Wow. Yeah, I bet those were loud, man. Gosh, system mature. You're still waiting. That's rough. I mean, I get it that people are waiting for the OM1. That I can almost understand, but uh, servicing your 150 to 400, that's not right. That shouldn't take so long. Because I've always had, before OM Systems took over, because I haven't had any problems, but I always got turnaround like fast. I mean, 5 days from door to door, from my door back to my door. Uh, I've gotten really good service. Of course, I wasn't sending in a 150 to 400 lens, but still. Yeah, that's too bad. Ugh. You're going on Tuesday with your 300 f4. Well, have a good time. But yeah, that's too bad. That 150 to 400 is pretty awesome. Yeah, I don't know what they did on, every manufacturer, if they're manufacturing their own lenses, they use their own coatings, and you know, or it's possible they're buying lenses off the shelf. Uh, for the kit lenses and things. I don't know. I don't know where, there's got to be there's got to be a line where they said we're going to build and manufacture the glass ourselves versus we're just going to buy off the shelf glass, right? I mean, all glass is coated. All lenses are coated inside and out. But on the higher end glass, probably Pro Glass, right? L Glass from Canon, etc. They do everything themselves, and that manufacturing process is, you know, it's really very very intricate, especially now, or well, in the last, with computer aided design. the the polishing and cleaning of the lenses and then applying the coating, is that process is critical. So I'll give you an example. If if you ever looked at older lenses, vintage lenses and things, and cheap lenses, modern or not, when you look at the bokeh balls, right, in the background, and they kind of got an onion ring, you know, look to them, because we've all heard of that, right? Onion ring bokeh. That's because they didn't polish the glass as well, right? But when you look at a pro lens and you look at the bokeh, it's smooth and creamy. Doesn't have a soap bubble or onion ring or specks in it. I mean, it is like clean. And that's because they polish the glass really, really smooth. Specifically, they have to polish the aspherical element. And the aspherical element in the lens is what causes that onion ring, because aspherical elements are just like phonetically what it means. It's not spherical, right? A spherical lens is just a part of an arc of a sphere. Aspherical has kind of ripples in it, right? And these ripples are what cause the onion ring. And the polishing process for the spherical lens is really, it's not easy. It's expensive. the spherical glass itself is very expensive, and designing it, right? Designing it, manufacturing it, polishing it, everything. So that's why pro glass, they usually have at least two spherical lenses, if not three or four, depending if it's a zoom or a super telephoto. Well, telephoto is a little easier to make. You don't need as much as spherical glass. But wide angle lenses, they need very high refractive, ultra high refractive. They need tons of glass, and really good coatings, because the more glass elements that you add into a lens, the more reflections you're going to get internally. So you need really good anti-reflective coatings on top of coatings that are helping to minimize all the aberrations that you get because of the way a light wave is, right? Some waves are longer than others. Some you can ignore, but you have to design the coatings, if not the glass itself, with certain impurities in it to adjust the wavelength of the light so that it hits the focal plane at the same time, so you don't get all these aberrations. So kit lenses, they're not going to have the same polishing, the same coatings, the same manufacturing tolerances as a pro lens. And going back to your point, if Panasonic is using a specific type of coating that's causing this flaring, that wouldn't surprise me at all, because it's definitely a reflection internally in the lens that's causing this flaring, because the light's hitting it a certain way coming in, and the way you can tell, the way you see coatings on a lens is when you look at a lens, like here, this is a Panasonic Lumix lens. This lens here, when you look at the lens at an angle, this one has a very purple, these have purple light reflections in it, right? It has purple light reflections on the one lens, and it has sort of a minty color reflections on another lens. And then another one is sort of a sky blue, right? And then let's look at my 12-40 Pro from Olympus. This lens has sort of a very magenta reflection and a very orange reflection inside. So just by looking at the color, it doesn't tell you anything optically how good the lens is, but I can definitely tell that these two lenses are using totally different coatings based on the reflections, right? Where's my 7-14? The 7-14, this one doesn't, this one has a mildly, very mild yellow. Oh, these super wide angle lenses, the bokeh inside is very small. I see very light purple, light blue, light orange, and white. So the reflections on this, the coatings are very, very different than even this Lumix lens. But not too different. They're pretty similar, actually, once I put them side by side. But this one definitely has a very strong orange. Not orange, but purple. There's a very, very purple blob in there, and a very light minty green blob. This one is, actually, it's pretty similar, the coatings. Well, anyway, like I said, it doesn't tell me anything optically about the lens other than it has coatings on it. And then if you look at some vintage lenses, a lot of times they have very rosy color which is interesting. And that could be partially why you have different characteristics of lenses, is because of the way the coatings are, and they give you different colors, right? Or different color response. But anyhow, holy crap. Are you serious? Somebody sold their 150 to 400 for above retail? Wow. Crazy. Chris is asking, can you share overall performance of OM1 against Sony A1Z9R3 over the tracking of bird photography? I made a decision going over OM1 and still on the wait list for over 2 months. Okay. I cannot, because I don't own any of those other 3 cameras. So I can't give you a direct comparison. The closest I came was I held someone else's Sony A1 and 600 millimeter f4, and I looked at some of the pictures, and I look at a lot of the pictures he takes, and they're awesome. But there's a guy, I'm gonna tell you to watch his video. Hopefully I can find it. If you haven't already seen it. This guy's name is Mike Lane. So this guy here, he's done several videos comparing so I'll put a link in the chat. And I don't want to give you any spoilers about what he ultimately chose unless you've already seen the video. But it's this video. He made his decision of which camera to pick. So let me put a link to this video. If you haven't seen it yet, this is the one. So from there, you'll have to find comparisons between the Z9, R3, and A1. Then between those 3 cameras, try to extrapolate how they would perform against the OM1. But if you haven't seen that video yet, I would, like I said, I don't want to give any spoiler alerts because it's a really good video. But watch his video about what he decided, because he's been shooting, I think, the A1 for about a year, and he wanted to try the OM1 side by side. So he did a lot of comparisons, and then in that video he talks about advantages, disadvantages, and which one he ultimately decided picking. And basically the advantages of the A1, I can tell you this much. He said that in terms of autofocus, the A1 was able to lock on. The A1, once it locked on, was able to hold the autofocus onto the subject more consistently than the OM1. The OM1 was able to lock on faster, but every now and then the focus would drift. It would come out and come back in. So there'd be 3-4 frames out of focus, then it would be back in focus. And that's been my experience as well. If I'm tracking a bird, I might have 3 or 4 frames here and there that are out of focus, but then it locks back on very quickly. But the initial focus acquisition is faster on the OM1 than the Sony A1. The other thing was that because he was able to do 50 frames per second with continuous autofocus on the OM1, ultimately he ended up with more keepers and more shots in focus than the A1, because the A1 can only do 20 frames per second. So even though the focus drift on the OM1, it acquired it faster and you got more frames. So in that sense, the OM1 was superior in practice, right? Because ultimately, how many shots do you get in focus? Well, the OM1 got more. Now, the disadvantage obviously was the A1 is like 50 or 60 megapixels. So that cropping ability is pretty much unmatched, right? You can crop in and still get really good detail. If you're using a 600 millimeter f4 versus a 300 millimeter f4 in OM1, now you're at equivalent focal length field of view, you're going to get sharper images on the A1 because it can crop. In practice, that's not the when you go to print, he said it was very difficult to tell the difference in print. You had to really, really look hard. So those are the two things I remember. And the other thing is the OM1 has the Pro Capture feature, which I can tell you I use a lot to get the images I do. And the A1 doesn't have that. So there's definitely some very distinct advantages other than size, weight, cost, right? Because it's 20 grand for an A1 plus a 600 f4. 20 grand. That alone is like makes the decision for me because I can't afford an A1 with that. But like I was saying, when another good person to look at is Mirrorless Lessons, Matthew Gasquet. He did comparisons, I believe, very similar to what you're asking me. And I don't remember the numbers. The OM1, I don't believe, beat the A1 or the Canon, but it was really close. And considering it's a half or third the price, not counting the lens, to me, the OM1 is hands down the best camera to get for sports and wildlife or bang for the buck. Money, no object. Yeah, you're going to spend a lot of money. But this guy didn't have to spend money. He already owned the A1. And I think he had the 200 to 500 lens. But he already owned the A1. So it wasn't like he had to make a financial decision, right? So that's a really good video to watch. So I'm sorry. I wish I could give you a personal answer, like a direct answer, but I don't own any of those other cameras or have used them to tell you. I'm just going through the chat. Bear with me. Marked Wolf, hello. So you want to get a DF like the one I have. I already have 2 Nikon full frame cameras. How do I fight the gas? Help. You are asking the wrong person, man. That's 2 people with gas asking, one person with gas asking another person with gas how to not have gas. Oh, I know what saved me a little bit. One is I don't have really a lot of money, but uh, taking out a camera I haven't shot with in a long time and shooting with it, that helped stave off for a little while buying another camera. So if I remember correctly, um, I can't remember. But that's what I did is take out a camera. If you have multiple cameras, like it sounds like you do, if you haven't shot with one in a long time, take it out and shoot. And then think about the difference in price, right? One you already have, so it's zero cost versus a DF, which is $1,000, right? Um, yeah, I know. I have a Zeiss. It's a newer lens, a Distagon 35 f2, which is amazing. It's an amazing lens. It's so heavy though. And then what's your favorite always? Oh my God. My eyes. I can't believe the doctor said I had good vision. Anyway, what's your fave always on you camera? I shoot S1 bodies professionally, but the G100 is always on me. Oh, well, if I'm not doing birding, right? Pen F. Pen F. I'm leaning towards a 25 millimeter lens, but it used to be this Pen F with a 17. But I'm really liking the Pen F with the 25. And that would be, if I couldn't have any other camera, that would be my one camera is the Pen F. If I could only have one lens right now, I'm leaning towards a 25 as my single lens now. But yeah, um, wow, that S1 is a beast. I really like my S5. I took it out last weekend to a car show and did an amazing job with the 20 to 60 kit lens. I'm going to take this out for some more photo walks because I've had this camera for 2 years. I've hardly used it. Seriously, I got maybe 2-3 hours field time with this camera. Uh, Maybe not even 1,000 clicks. I don't know, not much, right? And but yeah, it does a great job. So I'm going to take this out more and maybe do some vlogs with it because it's really a fantastic camera. I mean, I want to sell it, but it's just I won't even get half what I paid for it at this point. So I'm like, I mean, if I had used it a lot and I got half what I paid for it, no problem because I got my money's worth, right? Because I used it a lot, but I hardly use this thing. And I don't want to just give up half my money for a camera I hardly used. So I'm going to use the heck out of this thing and then sell it so I can at least feel like I got my money's worth. Okay. And Chris agrees the OM1 is the best bang for the. Yeah. Oh my God. I mean, I can only speak to my experience with the OM1, EM1 Mark III, but it's a huge difference in wildlife. And when I talk to users, like I talked to the guy that owned the A1 and the 600 F4, $20,000 setup, right? Uh, he had the same autofocus kind of challenges that I was having, like when the bird's behind a branch and um, the bird flies behind a tree, things like that, right? The bird is like in front of a bunch of trees. He had the same kind of issues I do, but to what degree is hard to say because I didn't get a chance to shoot this camera. Like I said, if I owned a $20,000 camera, nobody's touching it. That thing is going to be like, nobody touches my stuff if it's 20,000. If it's the OM1, it's expensive, but hey, you want to borrow it for the weekend, that's fine. But yeah, not a $20,000 camera. Anyhow, the A6600 would be my choice for best value for the money Sony camera. Full frame lenses on APS-C sensor at 24 megapixels and seems to have fast AF. Sure, why not? I mean, I don't know much about the Sonys anymore. The last Sony I actually had was the Sony NEX6. I still have it. I could sell that. I got my money's worth out of it, but it's worth like $100 now. So it's like I'm just going to keep it. All right. Well, okay, guys. I think I caught up with all the chat. If I missed any questions, I'll wait about 30 seconds to see. Ask me again because I'm not going to find it now at this point. It'd be faster for you to retype the question if you have any. But it's been great talking to everybody again. I really miss just chatting, and talking about photography. I know I rambled on a little bit about lenses, but that's because my brain is in that. I'm doing my due diligence and research on lens design, optics. There's so much physics involved. I feel like I'm learning like I'm in school again. But I'm like doing all these diagrams. Oh, it's hard. You can't see it. I'm doing all these diagrams and stuff, trying to learn optics and why certain lenses are put in lenses and not. And then I got all these notes. So it's like being in school again. But even with that, even if I spent another year on this, I'd only be scratching the surface. So what I'm trying to do is just learn just enough so that you can make a better buying decision or understand why lenses cost what they do. Because it's certainly hard to appreciate a 75 to 300 costs $500 and a 300 f4 cost, $3,000, right? 6 times as much. Why is there a big price difference? So I want to try to explain that, and then with the information I'm putting together, hopefully you'll be able to look at lens diagrams, look at MTF charts when it makes sense, and understand the differences between lenses. But I still have a ways to go. It might be another week or two before I can get just enough that I can put together and be able to communicate that effectively. But look for that, a video about lenses, because I'm just going to scratch the surface. There's no way I can study lens design to the level that needs to be studied, because it's really complicated. I downloaded some lens design software and was trying to design my own lens, and that was a train wreck. But in the exercise or effort, I did learn and understand the different kinds of aberrations you get when you use certain lenses and doing lens design, and some of the challenges involved. And a lot of it has to do with the tolerances in the build quality in the manufacturing process, so that you don't get those sample variations. And that's, yeah, anyway, we'll get into that. So you guys have a great, since I don't see any new questions, you guys have a great weekend, or What day? It's Sunday. Well, have whatever's left of the weekend. It was great seeing everyone again. And I'll probably be back on Thursday, maybe with a different lesson, another beginner's lesson. But we'll see. So thanks again for joining me today. We'll see you again soon. It's I can't remember how to stop it. There's a button here. End stream? No. Oh, here. Dummy. All right. Have a good